Okay, let's start the session. Especially in today's session, I want to discuss more on system analysis perspective under system business analysis and system design. And especially, we are going to spend some time on looking at details of requirements modeling. And last time, we discussed briefly on project management and project management techniques, which is again a very important aspect when it comes to you know uh, uh, developing information systems, right? So the topics that we will discuss under this module is aiming at how to develop information systems, what techniques, modeling tools that we could actually use for that purpose, and this is where we talk about. So if you summarize what we have done last time, we talk about PERT or CPM charts used for project scheduling. And also, like, sometimes I have seen you might use Gantt charts, which could be used to plan your projects. So in your case, it will be basically your software project, and you have to break down the tasks first. We call this as work breakdown structure, if you remember from our previous session. And then once you identify the task, you have to decide on average time it takes. So calculating average time you need for this, we look at the best estimate as well as worst estimates and possible case estimate, and we use a small formula to identify the duration. Now, once you have this information, then we can actually make a plan, and that is exactly what we discuss about how to identify task patterns, and also like how to combine them, finding out the critical path, and then calculating the critical path and so on. And under that, we discuss something called a slack time. Sometimes when you have multiple parts, some parts can, start in different times because you have a freedom to, start or, end the session. So these are the things that we have discussed last time. So we did some, I have gave some couple of, examples. And I hope with Ms. Supipi, you have worked on this example, and I have posted more so that you are comfortable with calculating this critical path as well as the project time and so on. And this is very similar to questions you might get in the exam as well, because when we want to, assess you in final examinations, we will have similar, questions comes in. Right. Now, back to today's session, what I'm going to focus today is basically system analysis phase. This is the second phase. And under that, I'm going to talk more on today, more on requirement modeling. So this is chapter 4 from the book. And I have already shared some parts of the book, and I will share today the remaining parts as well. Now, when we talk about the system analysis phase, there are a couple of things we are going to discuss in coming session. Now, today, I'm going to focus on the requirement modeling, and that is what the title of this, my session title. And under that, we will talk about how we can model requirements, especially user requirement. When you want to create a new information system, we have to talk to our clients and get their requirements. So how do you identify their exact requirement? It's very important, because once you start designing and implement the system, if something changes at the requirement, then it's very difficult and it's time consuming. So remember that. So we have to be thoughtful on this matter, trying to capture what exactly customer needs, customer requirements is very important. And that's the aspect I'm going to discuss today. And there are a couple of more comes in coming sessions, the data and process modeling. That means what data that you need to, store, especially in data flow diagrams, how data flow with different, sectors, as well as, in database level, how do you, plan your database and so on. And then we also going to discuss about the object modeling aspect, especially some applications we prefer to implement in object-oriented principles, and some naturally comes into that. So if that is the case, so what modeling techniques are we using? And then finally, we will discuss about the development strategies as well. So today I'm going to actually start with that part first. Right. Now, having said that, so let's start system development methodologies. We have already discussed in brief in our previous sections what these techniques are, right? So the first thing is we need to, talk about these, details. So when we talk about the system development methodology, we are going to talk about some kind of a framework or some kind of structure that we can use to plan and control of developing an information system. Now, there are a lot of examples are there. The system development life cycle, which is what we are going to discuss in detail in this module, which focus on different phases in system development. And we are going to discuss in detail what are the steps are there. Then other than this standard system development life cycle, there are many similar strategies like joint application development, rapid application development, and the latest ones which comes under what we call agile. So all these we will use to plan and control the different phases in the information system development. Right. Now, having said that, what we need to know is we need to depend on your information system. You may select one of these or something else. So what I want to stress here is not all these are suitable for your project, right? Depend on the nature of the project, you have to select one of them. If your requirements are concrete and will not change over the time, then the first one will be the best, the system development life cycle, which is quite old and traditional software development life cycle, which is the best if you are like can be finalized, and if the requirements are not changing. But depend on your requirements. Let's say your requirements are changing over the time, which is what we are heading in current software development industry. Then you have to choose agile, right? Which means like your requirements are changing over the time, and because the technologies are changing, the customer needs are changing, the patterns are changing. So maybe if you want to develop something which is like changing environment, then you have to go for agile. So the selection should be based on your nature of the project or software development project at hand. Right. Now, if you focus on the system development life cycle, this is, I told you, the traditional one, where you have 5 stages or 5 phases, starting from systems planning, system analysis, system design, system implementation, and finally system support and security. So remember that each of these phases, there are particular tasks that we need to complete, right? And it's good that you follow some methodology so that you are going to cover all the aspects of software development. Right. Now, if we briefly look at as a figure, this figure shows you all the 5 stages in one side, and the other side, the outcome. For example, if I take the first one, we have systems planning, and the outcome of the system planning is the preliminary investigation report. It's like, initial planning of your information system. And then you have a systems analysis part, which is our focus of the module, is system requirement document. Now we have to capture exactly what needs to be implemented in the information system. Once you capture that, we go to the third one, which we call system design. System design specification is outcome of this phase. Once the design is finished, then we go to implementation part of it. So once you implement the system, maybe you choose a particular software architecture, and then using particular programming technology stack, you are going to develop the system, and the outcome will be a functioning system. Now, once you have the functioning system, the next stage would be the support and security aspect of it, which means once you develop the system and you deploy it, right, you have to maintain it, right? So the outcome of the last stage will be the fully operational system, which is the system in operation, right? So these are the 5 phases if you select the system development lifecycle. Now let's go in brief details about what system planning is. So as you have already seen, it is the first phase, and that comes with the request for the system. Now, for example, let's say our university system SLTC, we have some already implemented software, right? So for example, we have SIMS, we have LMS, there are different software systems we use. And let's say some particular requirement, we don't have an information system. So you have to have a request for the system, right? And once you have a request, we need to perform initial investigation, which we call preliminary investigation. Because sometimes, although there are some requests, you might not be able to, implement the system. Maybe it's not technically feasible. Technically feasible means you don't have necessary, tools and techniques to implement it. Sometimes it might not be financially feasible, like you don't have enough, money to develop and operate information system. Not just develop the system. Remember, system development in the beginning, before you start, you have to think about, okay, how do you develop the system? How do you maintain it? You have to have the staff. You have to think about the staff cost, everything, right? So this is what we call the preliminary investigation, which will evaluate the request for system development, for an information system. And as I told you, the outcome will be the preliminary investigation report. So it could be a positive or negative, like say, okay, you can go ahead and you can, go to the next stage, or maybe just the negative saying that, okay, this is not possible due to these reasons, right? Okay, so that's the first phase. Now, the second phase is when you get a green light from the previous one, then you can go to the next phase. That's how always the what we call system development life cycles works in, especially waterfall, like you go from the first one to the second one and so on. So now in this step, what we do, we build what we call the logical model. Logically, like conceptual modeling. Like, for example, if you are familiar with the databases, we build our ER diagram. That is what we call logical model. It's not really a table structure or something. So it's logical. So you are trying to get the big picture, right? So the first step is the requirements modeling, right? So you need to first understand the system. So if you're a system developer for system analysis, the request may come from a different domain, which you might not understand. Let's say a hospital needs to develop a system. So if you're not familiar with what is going on in an hospital, you might have a difficulty. First, you need to understand the system. So you need to find what we call facts. We call fact finding, right? So you can use various techniques like interviews. For example, when I say interviews, maybe you can talk to a senior management or a head, right? Since I talk about the hospital, you can meet the top level management, like head of the institute, right? So consultants, so you can, use technique like interview, get more detailed discussion with individual. But then let's the lower level, let's say we have, the other doctors or the nurses and also the administrative staff and workers. So we have a very large number of group. So interviews is not possible. So you can go with the standard questionnaires we call surveys. And the next is like document review, which trying to understand, okay, what information to be recorded, what reports need to be developed within the information system. And then you can observe, right? So let's say you have no clue out what is going on the organization, you can just observe what is happening. For example, in a library, if you observe, you see that, okay, people come with the book, they will go with the book, they are paying their fines and all. You can make the observation to learn, to understand what exactly customer needs. And then sampling, which is the data, for example, you don't need everything, right? You need a sample. Let's say, you don't need all the records in a hospital. Maybe you can take randomly like 100 data points to understand this. So the results is used to build different models that we call business model, data and process models, object models, which I will cover, right? So I will explain, for example, how something happens within the system. Let's say in a hospital system, when a patient comes in, so what is the process until he get the required treatment and until he leave the hospital, what is, so we can use what we call business process models to understand how a particular function happens. Data and process models, so what data that flows from one place to another. For example, in hospital system, we can keep track of patient information, their medications, the doctor information, the data from one place to the other. We need to understand how the data is processed. And if you're using like object-oriented, development, then we can go for object models. For example, we can create, doctor object, we can create hospital object, we can create patient object, treatment object, and so on. So the deliverable is the system requirements documents, right? Remember that this phase is very, very important. And majority of the project, you should spend actually quite a lot of time trying to understand this phase, right? So if you are doing a project also, make sure that you actually collect exact requirements and you spend a decent amount of time for that. Right. The next one, once you have finished the system analysis, that means once you have a logical model, then you can go for a system design, which we call physical model. For example, database perspective, if you have done ER diagrams, then you can go for a table structures, right? So the physical model, you can create table structures, you can identify primary keys, foreign keys, and so on if it's a relational database design, right? So what really happens in the design stage? We can design user interfaces. You can identify what are the outputs, inputs, and the processes you can identify. And during the system design phase, you can determine application architecture. For example, if you're using like client server or cloud-based architecture, how exactly you are going to implement your system, right? And also which programmers will use transform the logical to program modules and the code. So basically the outcome of this phase will be the system design specification. Right. Okay. Then comes the implementation. So once you have the implementation space, we need to create the structure. We need to write down the program. We have to select, programming languages, for example. You have to write the code. You have to test. You have to document, and then you have to finally, install the system, right? Now, the development sometimes take different, directions. Sometimes we take some systems we purchased instead of developing a system from scratch. That means if you are like, let's say you are going to develop from scratch, from the starting, then it take quite a lot of time. So if it is a common problem that we need to solve, there are already existing software we could purchase. And what we are doing at this stage, if you are purchased, we do some configurations and do some modifications, right? So the outcome of this stage will be that we will have a complete functioning system and complete document information system, right? So that means at the end of this system implementation stage, we will have a system ready. Okay, next one. The last stage in system development life cycle, usually once you have a purchase and you have implemented, the next one is the operational aspect of this. So you have to have some IT staff to maintain, enhance, and protect the system. So there are a few things we could think about to what will happen during maintenance. For example, they may work with correcting any errors. So you know that when you are developed, there could be errors. And also, if there are like changes happening, then you have to change, you have to adapt the change. For example, tax rate. So the taxes are changing year to year, for example. So depend on some changes that should be incorporated. That also comes under maintenance. Then enhancement, like, okay, you develop an information system, but let's say you want to improve the system. Users are requesting new features, right? So enhancement means you are developing or you are providing new features as well as benefits. So the outcome of this is you need to maximize the return. What do you mean by return? Remember that when you are developing a system, you have to spend some money. So what is the return? You have to think about this, right? When you're purchasing something, you have to think about, okay, what will be my return on investment? It's an investment for organization. And then security controls. Nowadays, there are a lot of threats comes from both external and internal parties. We have to have, safeguard the system. People might try to get your data out, you have to be very careful. So if you have a well-designed system, at the end, it should be secure, should be reliable, meaning that there's no failures, no downtimes. It should be maintainable, meaning like when the new requirements come in, there should be a way to, improve the system. And scalable, meaning that, let's say, you want to expand your organization into multiple, cities, the countries. So the system should allow that. Right. Okay. Now, what we discuss is the first one. Now, the second one is called joint application development. This actually is what we can go for it. This is what we call fact-finding technique. So I told you, like, nowadays, the users are in the development process. We call them as active participant. because without customers, there's no point of developing something in the way we want, because at the end, they are the ones who are going to use this, right? So what happens, the users, usually we have to have all these users, we have to incorporate them, and depend on the meetings. Let's say joint application development teams, usually they meet a period of days. So maybe you can have in a separate special location for that, or maybe outside, and nowadays maybe through Zoom, right? So you go through what we have right now, and then you get your user inputs and their expectations, and then you need to document requirements, right? So especially this information should come from the users. So usually if the IT department is involving in this, they will ask users about the design, about the comments on the changes. Right, and there are other things as well. Now, for example, when we have joint application development, there are like different participants and there are different roles, right? For example, there are what we call leader for this, and they are the ones who actually lead these sessions, and there'll be top management, managers, users, and so on. There are different groups of people are participating in these sessions, right? So just to conclude that, what advantages or disadvantages we might get. One advantage compared to previous is the active participation of the users. So when you say users are actively participating, it's very easy for us to develop the requirements, right? Because what we need is that if you are not sure about what users actually require in your information system, and if you do not understand the goals, so that will affect the success of your system. But there are problems as well. Now, for example, since the users are involved in this one, it will take more time. So we normally say it's more expensive and sometimes cumbersome if the group is too large related to the size of the project. So if the project is a very small, but you have a large user base, then it's actually disadvantage, because all these meeting user involvement cost a lot of money. You might spend a lot of money on the initial stages, right? Let's move to the next one. The second one is called rapid application development. This idea actually pop up after the software development life cycle waterfall model, and this is what we call team-based technique. And the point is that we want to speed up the development. Sometimes we don't have much time, or you don't need to spend years on developing, but you want to develop system quite faster, right? And at the end of these phases, you will get a new information system, and there are 4 phases in this life cycle. Right now, let's try to understand what phases are there. Now, when you look at the phases, this is what are the phases in rapid application development. As I told you earlier, you can see there are 4 stages. We have requirements planning, user design, construction, cutover, and these phases always interact with the users, right? The user involvement is also there, right? So let's look at in detail what these developments are, right? So for example, starting from requirements planning. Now, during the requirement planning phase, especially it's very similar to software development life cycle that we have discussed earlier. Usually this phase combines both system planning and system analysis phase of software development life cycles. So what happens here, different users, the managers, IT staff, they come to an agreement on what they need, the project scope, any constraints, and also the requirements, right? And then they will agree on the issues, the key issues, and then you will get the approval from the top management. Then the second phase comes with the user design task. Now, when you say user design, users, you normally interact with the system analysis and develop. They develop models and prototypes, and these will represent all the processes, right? And this rapid application development group use a combination of joint application development technique that we have discussed earlier, as well as what we call case tools, which we can use to extract user needs into some kind of models, right? For example, user design is basically, we can say it's a continuous interactive process, and during that time users can understand, they can modify, and they can approve a working model of the system. So that's what we call user design. Now, once you finish the user design part, we will have construction. Now, during the construction, what happens? We are going to develop the programs, right? Now, similar to software development life cycle stages, this is a place where you develop the system, right? But the difference here is users are there. So they'll participate, they can suggest changes, or they can make improvements for the development, right? And then any testing strategies, like for example, when the system is developed, you can develop individual unit level, we call unit testing. Then you can test among different units, we call integration testing. And then you can test the whole system, which we call system testing, right? So that's what happened during the construction. The last stage is what we call cutover. Cutover means like there are conversions. For example, you change the data, and then you will test, and then you can implement the new system. That means, let's say you already have an existing system and you are going to implement the new system. So that change you have to maintain during this phase, right? And also sometimes you have to train the users. So basically, as you can see, these 4 stages, kind of iterative stages, and at the end, you will develop an information system. Now, why people are using rapid application development is, using rapid application development, you can reduce the cost compared to system development life cycle, and you can also reduce the development time, and it will be mostly a success compared, because users are actively engaging in the development. So as you can already see, what they rely is based on prototyping, the models that you create, as well as how users are interactive with the systems that you will build, right? So then the users, they don't have to wait until years to see what they will get, the outcome, and they can change accordingly, right? So based on these inputs, so these prototypes we call modified, and it'll interactively, change until the system is fully developed and users are fully satisfied. So that's what happens in the rapid application development. So there also we have some advantages and disadvantages. Now, main advantage when it comes to rapid application development, you can develop quickly and you can save a lot of money compared to other phases. But there are some disadvantages as well, right? Now, one problem is they not focus on company strategic business needs, like when you have long plan. So what happens is when you develop a system work well in a short term for the users, those who are involving, but when you think about the long-term plans might not, work. So that is one of the disadvantages, right? And not only that, since you are trying to develop quickly, right? So sometimes you will get less quality, less consistency, less design standards. Usually like, all the models that you develop, you might skip because you want to save time. So that is one of the disadvantages. For example, later stage, if you want to change something, if you do not properly document it, you will have a lot of issues. Right. Now, we talk about the first three under this. So let's move on to the last one as well as the latest, develop, which we call agile, right? In agile, what we try to do is we are going to develop the system incrementally, right? So you build series of prototype, the working models, and continuously you are trying to change user requirements. So when you continue, you develop, revise, extend, and merge most of the time earlier version of the final product. So one thing that you can emphasize here is the continuous feedback, especially getting from the users. And you can improve, since you are doing it iteratively, always improve the next step based on the previous step. And there are many agile mechanisms. One of the most popular use of this is called Scrum, right? I think we discussed Scrum earlier as well. Just to talk about briefly, the product features, let's say you have a set of product backlog we call, that means features to be implemented. And users are there because users are the ones who are going to decide which backlogs you are going to implement. So backlog, as I told you, it's a set of features that you are going to implement. And during for this development, usually you have fixed time. And this is called sprint, right? And the meeting, usually the phase which actually decide on which product backlog you are going to use, we use sprint planning. So it could be like 2 to 4 week sprint, which means the development takes 2 weeks to 4 weeks time. And each of the 2 to 4 weeks time, you have daily meetings just to see how you are progressing, right? So one way we can improve this is maybe if there are interested parties, we can, share them, right? That's about the agile and very brief discussion on how Scrum works. But fully understand Scrum, I highly suggest you to read more on Scrum, agile technique, and how it is implemented to know the necessary details. Right. So as we discuss Scrum, you have intense interaction, especially more mental than physical, which you get all the requirements. And then during the Scrum sessions, when we meet people, the Agile team members, they take different roles. Now, for example, one of the designation, they usually say that, okay, we take the pigs or the chickens, right? So when you talk about the pigs, they call the product owner, right? So they are the facilitator and the development team. And the chickens are the users, other stakeholders, the managers. So when you are performing Scrum sessions, you have a specific guidelines. You have time blocks, interaction, team-based activities, right? To deliver the results in a software. And Agile team, they use a series of scrums to pause the action and allow the players to rest, reset the game plan, which remains in efficient until the next scrum. Right. Let's conclude our discussion. Now, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of Agile method? One thing you should note, it's very flexible and efficient when there's a change. So if things are changing, as I told you earlier, rapidly, then maybe you can go for Agile technology, right? And they focus on team interaction and also like reflect the community-based values. I told you, like usually in Scrum, we call backlog the set of features, and the users are one, they prioritize these backlogs. And as I told you, like each sprint, I told you like they are shorter period of time, the development time, 2 to 4 weeks, I told you like the standard. So since there are frequent deliverables, you can always validate and you have a reduced risk of failing. But there are other disadvantages as well if you focus on the Agile method. Now, one thing is team members, you need to have high level technical and interpersonal skills, because there are a lot of meetings. We are within these meetings that you have to sort it out everything. So the communication or interpersonal skills is a must. And you have to have a strong technical background. Another disadvantage is the structure and documentation, because you are not focused, right? Now, software development life cycle, for example, you start with the logical model, the physical model, the implementation. So you have series of different documents you produce. But when it comes to Agile method, you are not very keen on keeping this structure and documentation, but which can affect in later stage. And another disadvantage is when you start somewhere and you might end somewhere else, because there could be significant change in the scope, right? So because of that, keep this in mind as well. So there could be a series of significant changes. And so at the end of the day, what you started may be significantly changed once you have the final project. Right. Okay. I think we came to the half of the presentation, and what we discuss is the developments, right? Okay. So I told you like you have group work, and the next part I'm going to talk about what you need for the group work. Now, what we want to focus in, how do you like understand the design? So for that, we need different models, tools, and techniques, modeling tools and techniques, right? So, so what should happen in the system analysis phase is we need to understand the project, we need to ensure it will support business requirement and build a solid foundation for system development, right? So modeling takes a significant role here, right? So when you talk about this uh, development, you can use various techniques. You can have requirements modeling, you can have data and process modeling, you can have object modeling. So once you have this, then you can think about the development strategies. And that is the technique usually we use when we want to design the system. We use different, techniques to identify the requirements, right? And that's what you see here as well, right? Now, when you say requirements modeling, for example, here, what we need to understand is for example, what are the outputs? What are the inputs? What are the processes? What is the performance? How do you handle the security? Things like that you evolve in requirements modeling, right? So requirements modeling, usually we can say it describes the current system and requirements for the new system. Then we have data and process models. Now that we will discuss later on. Now graphically, for example, we are going to look at how the data and process, right? So how the data flows in the process, what are the business rules, and so on. Then object modeling. Then when we have data and processes which you have identified earlier, they can represent as objects, right? And I told you, like, this comes with the object-oriented analysis. So the data and processes we put into something called objects, right? So these objects can represent like people, things, transaction, events, and so on. Right. Then finally, the development strategies, which we have discussed earlier, various development options, right? And that we will put into system requirements document. Right. Okay. Now let's move on the techniques. And this is what I told you, like you need for the group work as well, right? Okay, first one, we need to understand why we need different models, right? Now, for example, ER models is a one way to represent your data requirements, right? So models help users, the managers, or the professional, first of all, understand the design of a system. And usually you have graphical methods, like, for example, even, we have flow charts. That is a graphical representation of an algorithm. And when you use graphical models, it's easy for the non-technical persons to understand. We normally call non-technical language, right? So we can use different tools, and using them, we can describe business processes, requirements, as well as user interaction, right? So there are different techniques we can use. Functional decomposition diagrams, which I'm going to discuss now. Business model processes, again, another one that I'm going to discuss. Data flow diagrams, UML, these comes discussed later in coming session. So all these models can be used to understand the system, the design of the system. Okay, right. Let's start with the first modeling technique. Our first modeling technique is called functional decomposition diagram, or FDD. So in FDD, we can talk about how we can represent, right, a function or the processes. So this is called top-down representation, right? And we can show different business functions, and we can break into different low-level function, right? And we can use this to develop, several stages of the system development, right? So basically what we are trying to do with the functional decomposition diagrams, we can show how they are organized. And these can translate to different program modules, right? Now, let me explain with an example, right? I hope you can see this diagram. Now, let's say in this particular case, we are going to develop an information system for a library. So we can simply say this is a library information system. So the main module is, we can call, or main function or the main process, we can say it's a library management. So that is the first one. So we are going to manage a library. Now, when you talk about the library management, there are different processes. There's a human resource, process, which we focus on, taking people, recruiting people, right? So that comes under human resources, or maybe, recording their attendance and making reports on their presence and so on. And then you have finance and accounting, where you talk about finance, right? Because that is also important. But the main one, which comes under library management, is library operations. So without this module, there's no value for the other modules. That is the main one. And that is what we are going to focus in this session. Actually, you can have more low-level function with the other modules as well. But since the library operations is the main one, we are focusing on that. And the fourth one, fundraising. And the last one, according to this one, new user acquisition. Now let's focus on the library operations. So when you say library operations, there could be many things. Operating budgeting, for example, you will have to have a budget for purchase of books, right? So and for salaries, for other tasks and so on. So this is cooperations on operations budgeting. Then the main one comes under here as book management. So you know that under that one, we can talk about how to add or remove books, checkouts and returns, archive checkout list and user list, user updates, report generation. And apart from this, you have personal assignments as well. So you can see the functional decomposition diagram is a modeling technique that we can use to show different processes. So there'll be a main process. Under that, we have these processes. And then you can go into detail, low-level details like this. So the implemented stage that you can actually develop different models or modules for each of these. Okay, any questions on this part? Will you be able to come up with a diagram like this if you given a new information system? I hope so, and that is exactly what we are going to do, right? Okay, next. Another example. This is again function development diagram. Sorry, decomposition diagram, FDD, for e-commerce website. You know that there are websites where we keep information about our products, the customers, and the details. So this will show you like different modules. So you can see according to this diagram, the e-commerce, you have two sub-processes, customer service, because e-commerce is usually a main job is to main process to servicing customers. And then we have administrative services. So under the administrative services, you can have another process we call add, edit inventory, add a new book, update an inventory, and so on. Now, if you take customer services, what are the customer services we provide? Now we provide, let's say this is based on some products, let's say. If that is the case, we have to have a functions for browsing the products, the search in the products, and the users are allowed to read reviews done by other users, or you can write reviews. And then you have to have a shopping cart where when customers purchasing items from this website. So first one, you should create a shopping cart, and then you can add or delete items. Right, now since this is the buying and selling, you have to have customer authentication. So each of the customers we need to implement, we have to have user profiles. We have to keep track of their purchase histories. And for each purchase they are making, we want to keep track of their shipping details and the other processes like placing order, shipping details, and the checkout. All this information should be out there. And then final one, new user registration, you can create the user profile. So as you can see now, this is very detailed description of the processes in a particular information system. So we have already seen two in library management system as well as e-commerce system. Right. Now we can also look at another modeling technique. Now, not in this one, which we normally call business process modeling. The idea is we are trying to understand how business happens, right? Let's say you are going to purchase a chicken, right, during the holiday season. Let's say we are going to have a party and we want to have a chicken. So you are going to purchase a chicken from, let's say, some shopping mall. So if you think about the process of, purchasing a chicken from the starting from the farmers, so the, persons who have farms on chickens coming out as a product, you have a series of processes. And if you're developing an information system to cater the whole process, you should explore or you should understand how each of these business processes. There are different modeling techniques we are using, and the most common technique that we use to process a business is called business process model, or in short, we say BPM, right? So, for example, handling airline reservation, filing product order, updating a customer account. So all of these you can actually create business process model. Right, now let me give you some examples. Now let's say you have an order processing system. It could be anything, but let's say you are trying to make a order. So usually the name that you have system is given like this, and these lines are known as swim lanes, which indicates different aspects. Now, for example, if you are a new user or new customer to this system, what are the business processes, right? For example, if you are a new customer, then we should obtain your credit data, and you have to check your credit status, and then we can allocate a customer number. If you're an existing customer, then you process the order, you create bills, and then you create the shipping data. Right. Okay, this is one of the simplest business process model on order processing system. Right. Let me give you now one more example. Now, some business processes are more complicated. Right. Now, for example, the second one that we are going to discuss, you see it as a kind of a flow chart. Now, this is about one particular company called ABC Company, and there's an employee is trying to get a leave from the company. You know, when you work for a company, usually when you want to take a leave, you have to first get the approval, right? So how do you make a request? You have to first request, you have to submit an application, and somebody who is boss of that employee or the manager has to approve the application. If it is approved only, you will be granted the leave. So as you can see, there are a few things that I would like to highlight in this diagram. There are 3 swim lanes to indicate different persons. Now, for example, this lane indicates the processes handled by or processes executed by the employees. This one, we see processes executed by managers. And here we have a human resource department. Right. Now, this is the first process. So the block is the process. So this is the starting point. Arrow indicate the flow of the process. So the first step is you fill the leave application form. You will fill the leave application form. And then once you fill it, you have to submit it for the approval. So usually it should come to the manager. So let's say you submit it, and then you, in the manager level, you evaluate. Evaluate means you are going to decide whether to accept or reject the application. So this will represent a decision block where you can either approve or decline, yes or no. If you say no, that means, okay, you are not allowed to take leave. So you have to inform employee, and then this is the end, usually stop. Right? And if it is yes, then you are granting the leave. If you grant the leave, you have to inform the HR department because they are the ones who are responsible for handling their salaries and so on. Right? So you have to inform to the HR department to handle this application. And then back to the employer. So if you are in this direction, that means you have already granted the leave. You can take the leave, and then that is the end of the process. Right. Any questions, guys, on this one? Anything it's not clear to you? Can you type in the chat? Okay, those who have understood, can you raise your hands? I think I better put in it that way. Those who have understood this diagram, my explanation, can you please raise your hands? Okay, it looks like none of you have understood. Chamat Lasindu, is that the case? You didn't understand at all? Okay, at least now I see some of you are raising your hands. Thanks. So you understood, right? There are 2 things that you can do if you do not understand. You can ask me to repeat it. I will try my best to explain it again. Otherwise, you can find similar recordings. You can explore more on business process modeling to understand what these representations are. Okay. Thanks, guys. You can lower the hands. I think about, yes, 20% of the class understood, which means others may have not, they have not understand this, I guess so. So I'm thinking of explain one more time, right? Okay. Now, first of all, let me go back to what this modeling technique means. This is called business process model, or in short, we say BPM. Now, business process models graphically represent how the process take place. When you do something, okay, what are the process involved in that? And that is what we call business process modeling, right? So we have discussed two diagrams. First one is about the order processing system, where you take the orders and process it. Now, what this box represent the whole system, the order process system. And then there are some sections we call swim lanes, because depend on whether you are a new customer or existing customer, you are going to perform different processes. So therefore, we have to create some swim lanes. And if you are a new customer, you can get the credit data, you can validate, and you can assign a customer number. So once you get a customer number, then you become an existing customer. So you can process the order, prepare the billing, and you can create the shipping data. So that's the first one we discussed. Now, second one is about taking a leave from a company called ABC company. So in the bigger rectangle, you see in this line is ABC company. And there are three parties are involved: employee in one side, manager in the other side, and human resource department from the other side. So when a person wants to take a leave, he fill the application form and send it to the manager. Manager get the application, manager has to decide whether to say yes or no. If say no, then that is the end. If they say yes, then we can go, right? So here, manager will say yes. If that is say yes, you inform the employee that, okay, you can take the leave. If you say no, then just, finish at that point. You can inform employee that the request is declined. Right. Okay. And one more complicated one. Right. Now, this is about ordering a pizza. And when you say ordering a pizza, in this particular case, you can see a customer as well as a pizza shop. So it's separated, right? Again, it's more complicated than the previous one. So you have separate ones. And then now you can see the customer side. When you are hungry, that is our starting point. Let's say you are going to order pizza. So first one, you have to select the pizza. Then you have to order the pizza. When you order pizza, that will affect the starting point here. Right? So now when you get that, right, there are two things happen. When you want to get information, you can get it from here, right? And once you perform the order, right, and after some time, you can actually check whether it's actually prepared. So pizza shop clerk usually is the one started, is send this requirement to the chef. They bake the pizza and then it put it to delivery guy, and delivery guy will send it back, right? You receive the pizza, right? And then once you receive the pizza, you have to pay for pizza. So that payment will receive by the pizza delivery guy, and it will give it to this. So you will get money, and then you provide the receipt for this. And once you pay it, you can eat it. And when you receive the payment, you can proceed. Right. Okay. Now that we have discussed about two things, functional decomposition diagrams and business process models. Then next thing we are going to discuss data flow diagrams, how systems stores, process and transform data, right? And this part we will discuss in our coming session, so I'm not going to spend time on this. Okay, now system requirements. Now requirements modeling, we use like modeling techniques. So system developers can identify, describe all system requirements, right? And this requirement is what we call the feature in information system to satisfy business requirement. So there are different categories. We have out in process, performance and controls. So let me give you some system requirement example. When you say output, for example, the student record system must produce transcript for each student showing course name, course code, course name, number of credits, grade, and date of examination. So this is the output requirement. Okay, so input requirement. Student grade must be entered machine scannable forms and prepared by the instructor. So how you should, prepare your inputs. Third, processes. The student record system must calculate the GPA at the end of each semester. So that calculation should be done. Performance. The system must support 25 users online simultaneously. So when you have a large number of, users, then we can, talk about how many users you can, handle online. Then control. The system must provide logon security at the operating system level and application level. So these are some examples for output, input, process, performance, and control. Right. Now, when it comes to fact-finding process, I told you we can use different techniques, the interviews, documents, observation, questionnaires, sampling, and even you can go for research for collecting information. So when you want to have interview, remember that it's not an easy task. You have to have a good planning because you will get a limited time, let's say half an hour with the top management. They are usually busy. So you have to have a good planning, and you have to have a strong interpersonal and communication skills, right? And you have to decide, okay, who are the people you are going to interview? Like, for example, library information system, you are not going to interview everyone. So you are going to interview only selected people. You have to decide on that. And for each interview, you have to have an objective. And so you have to prepare, conduct, and also analyze these interviews, right? So you can use different software tools for this. Right, to conclusion. So during the requirements modeling, we have system developers. You have to have a clear understanding of the different processes and their requirements. And then based on that, we can build some logical models. Right. Okay. I think we have completed the theory part today. And the next part, as we always do, is remember the group work, where one of the topics that we have discussed in the class, we are going to implement, right, as a group. And then you are tentatively, you are going to submit it, right, within half an hour time. We have about 40 minutes to finish the session. So during that time, as a group, you should work in groups to, answer the group work, right? So you can create a very small report, maybe a Word document. You can convert it as a PDF and you can submit, or you can just write in the half sheet or something, and you can just take a picture and submit. You don't have to spend a lot of time on this. Whatever you do within this 40 minutes is enough, right? What I need is, as a group, you should work together, discuss among yourself, and come up with a decent answer, right? So don't try to put everything on, for example, chat GPT, or like trying to cheat, because you are going to cheat yourself, right? You know, tools are there, it's for the good, but you know, then you are not going to learn anything new, right? So I want you to be you know, truthful for you and work on the group work. So let's start. So like in our previous group work, first of all, as a group, you have to decide on a one particular information system. And don't try to you know, take very simple one like, say, school management system and so on. Get some challenging software development problem, and then try to answer the question, right? So you need to propose an information system. You have to think about the objective, right? For example, the objective of a university might be, you know, producing employable graduates and so on. So similarly, you have to have an objective for the information system. Now, once you do that, I want you to identify the requirement for the proposed system, identify the requirements for output, input, processes, performance, and control. So we have a slide on that one. Please have a look at it. I already shared the diagram with you, right? And then I want you to create a functional decomposition diagram. Actually, I can ask business process diagram, but the time is not enough. So let's focus on a functional decomposition diagram for the system. What do you mean by functional decomposition diagram? So we have seen like a diagram like this for your information system. So already we discussed library management system. Don't select library management system therefore, right? We already have. So you are supposed to identify all the requirement, all the processes, the high-level processes as well as low-level processes of your system using functional decomposition diagram. Right, I think we are ready now. I'm going to share the description in the WhatsApp chat so that you can start working on it. And then I will put you in groups, right? And remember that I'm keeping a record of those who are here today. In case if you are disconnected, you know about your group mates, you know, contact with them. And this is a group work, so everybody should contribute. Okay, remember that, very important. In case if your friends are not you know, contributing, so let me know. Okay, right, now I have shared the requirements in the WhatsApp, so you have the requirements ready. So let's put you into the groups. We have about 92 today. Okay, let me create breakout rooms. Right. So I'm creating 30 groups and you can join. And start the work.